Good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining. We're going to jump right into things. I'm just going to briefly introduce myself and the company and hand it over to my team to take you through this seminar. So I'm Rob from REM Web Solutions. We've been in business now for 20 years, so a pretty long time in the grand scheme of the internet. We're based in Kitchener, and our primary focus is helping clients in the Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Waterloo region area and Guelph. We focus on doing custom designed websites. So we actually have an in-house design team who you're going to get the opportunity to meet in a minute. Two of our senior graphic designers who have been with us for many, many years are going to talk about their experience and knowledge with AODA. But working with us, you get the opportunity to work directly with our design team to come up with websites that are not just going to look pretty, but really focused on engaging your target audience. Every website we integrate, every website we develop, we integrate into our content management tool. It's called Web Wizard, and it's extremely easy to use. The thing that we're probably most proud of is the fact that whenever you need help, you get to pick up the phone and give us a call or send us an email. And we have a fantastic customer success team here that helps our customers not just during the project, but for the many years after that they're a client. So we're quite proud about the reputation we built with the level of support that we offer. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Sean and Christine. Like I said, they're both senior graphic designers. I'll let them talk a little bit more about them. And they're going to talk to you today about AODA, why it's important, the law around it. This is a law that actually was introduced in 2005, believe it or not. And it's just, as far as the website piece goes, this particular piece we're talking about today is becoming law at the end of this month. So if there are any people who need our help, obviously we're here to help. So feel free to reach out. Our contact info is at the end of the presentation. You can reach out to me anytime or any of the designers that you're going to be talking to today. And we're more than happy to answer questions or help you get your website where it needs to be. So without further ado, I'll pass everybody on to my team, and I'm going to disappear for now, but I'll be here to help answer questions at the end.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, thanks a lot. So I'm going to start off with myself. So as Rob mentioned, my name is Sean Sanderson. I'm a senior graphic designer at REM Web Solutions. I've been with REM for 15 years. Sorry, I've been practicing graphic design for 15 years, 12 of which have been at REM. So I did a 4-year graphic design program from Fanshawe College, and I've achieved a certification in inclusive design and AODA from Humber College. I like to focus on digital web-based design at REM. On my own time, I like to dive into some custom branding, print projects, and other design-related things. I'm very knowledgeable and proficient in AODA compliance and inclusive design with an overall goal of just making Ontario and the websites that we work on more accessible.
Thanks, Sean. And my name is Christine Votruba. I'm also a senior graphic designer here at REM Web Solutions. I have an overall experience of about 13 years, 5, actually almost 6 of which has been with REM. I have a Bachelor of Design degree from OCAD University. I also have a web design development certificate from Centennial College, and I also took that same course about inclusive design from Humber College with Sean. I have a lot of print and web and branding experience. And also, I have a lot of experience when it comes to making websites that are AODA compliant as well, because we've done that a lot here at REM. But enough about us for a bit. We're actually really want to know about you guys. So who are you? What company are you from? What are you hoping to gain out of this presentation? Is there anything in particular you want to learn? Please let us know in the chat box. You can just type it in there right now. Also, if there's any questions that pop up in your head or anything, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box. We will go through everyone's questions at the end of the presentation. We got a little bit of time for that, so we will be more than happy to answer those questions for you. Also, if you want a PDF copy of this presentation, please let us know. Give us your contact information like your email, and we will be glad to email that to you as well. So just to go over everything, Rob did mention a little bit about this. So we're going to talk about AODA, what it is exactly, how it affects you and your business, the design factors to think about, and other media focused on websites and other screen-based platforms. At the end of the presentation, we have important resources for you guys that you can use to just check to see if your website is compliant, certain items and stuff like that. So let's get started. So the law when it comes to AODA, what is it exactly? So Ontario is the first province in Canada to pass a law that will create mandatory accessible standards in order to identify, remove, and prevent barriers for people with disabilities in what are considered key areas of daily living. So, accessing websites is definitely an important key area of living, especially nowadays. The Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act 2005, AODA, became law on June 13, 2005. The goal of the AODA is to make Ontario accessible to people with disabilities by 2025. So that's not that far from now. So and there's a lot of little areas here and there when it comes to the 5 standards. The one that we're going to be focusing on, the main category, is information and communication standards, because that's where digital communication and websites fall under. There's a bunch of other ones as well. So there's customer service accessibility, employment standards, transportation, and design of public spaces. But we're not going to be going over that right now because obviously our focus is websites. So why does it matter for everyone, right? Well, yeah, I guess it is a law. So that means that's the obvious reason. It's also important when it comes to creating communities, right? I mean, there's so much emphasis nowadays about making things local and supporting local businesses. And you want to make your business and your website, your digital store, to be as inclusive and accessible to everyone as much as possible. So you're not excluding anyone, you're not alienating anyone, and you're making them feel happy and glad and have a really nice experience when it comes to going to your website. And in that perspective, that makes it a really great digital marketing strategy. Because you're making your website accessible, you're making it um, accessible to the largest audience possible. So that means that could be a lot of potential customers that you could consider. And it's actually really surprising how many people there are in Ontario that have considered disabilities. So Sean's going to go over that next.
Yeah, thanks. So next we do have some important facts. So I guess a little furthermore to why this is important. 1 in 7 Canadians over the age of 15 do identify as having a disability. So pretty big number there if you may not have realized that. So 80% of those who identify as having the disability actually make use of at least one assistive device. This could be a screen reader or even a keyboard. So next up, we're going to talk about some of the key dates, the AODA key dates. This applies to businesses and nonprofits. So starting with businesses with 1 to 19 employees, the required action would be to have a new or renovated public space accessible. So this has passed January 1st, 2018. The next one up we would have is 20 to 49 employees with the required action to just file an accessibility report. Again, there has been a deadline that's passed with another one coming up very shortly at the end of the month. And finally, we have what we're really focusing on is the businesses and nonprofits with 50 plus employees. So again, another date has passed in 2017 to file the report, but the big one is that your website and all of your web content must be accessible and it must meet the WCAG 2.0 level AA by January 1st, 2021. So we'll talk a little bit more about the WCAG and what that's all about and a little bit more in the presentation as well. So with the dates quickly approaching, you may still be wondering, is this really important? But really, it is important. We want to make the best experience for people and the users using our websites. So these will ultimately turn into opportunities. It could also be considered a human rights issue, really. So far, Ontario has rolled out the accessibility law in full, but other provinces are working on them as well. And Canada, and even in general, is working on a bill C81, which is expected to use the same guidelines that we're establishing in Ontario. Neighbors down south in the United States have their own version of this, Section 508, but only right now it only actually applies to government organizations. And as expected, the lawsuits are up 177%. So this is increasing even more so than these stats here. So we're going to take a little bit of a break and do our first kind of poll question. And the poll question being, can you provide examples of groups that would benefit from an accessible website? Feel free to use the Q&A section, as Christine mentioned, for your answers, and we will give it about a few minutes for people to add your comment there.
Mhm. Oops. Oh.
Yep.
We actually have an interesting question. We have an interesting answer here. It's the answer is everyone. Actually, if you do think about it, it does benefit everyone.
Yeah, it really
'Cause
does. Yeah.
mhm.
Okay, we'll just maybe we'll give
Oh,
some
actually,
examples and then. Yep.
oh, also we have another one here. Yes, seniors would benefit from an accessible website as well. So thank you. That is a
Yep.
really good answer. Yeah. Oh,
Okay, yeah, so great answers, and some of them are right on the money there. So first off, the first group that would benefit are obviously people with visible disabilities. So these are people that have, blindness and other vision problems. One of the answers here was right, the senior citizens. So approximately 4.6 million or 16.4 people in Ontario are over the age of 65. So having an accessible website does benefit them very much as well. Non-native English speakers, 20% of Canadians. So having an option to have the text change on your website to different languages, that is always a good thing as well. So people with invisible disabilities would be another group. So this could be disabilities such as dyslexia or color deficiency like color blindness, for example. We will be talking about color contrast and things like that as well. So next we have people with temporary disabilities. So even a broken wrist, if you can't use your mouse, you are able to use your keyboard to navigate through a website, and your website should be able to do that. And lastly, we do have people with older technologies. So these are people with smaller screens and slow internet. An accessible website will benefit these people as well.
okay. Thank you, Sean. I'm now going to go over the design factors. So things to consider when it comes to websites to make it accessible. So we're going to talk about first the design goals, the inclusive design, the acronym CORE. So that is an acronym to help remember WCAG's core principles and guidelines. And then Sean will also talk about color contrast, visual hierarchy, and I will take you through images for the web. So our design goal is to use inclusive design from the start of a website project. As we've mentioned before, accessibility goes beyond legislation. It's a great opportunity to bring communities together and make them more engaged when it comes to the content of your website. Um, y- Using inclusive design ensures that your content reaches the largest audience as much as possible. Just by making a few little changes here and there will greatly improve their experience. So, what is inclusive design anyway? So, inclusive design is the design of mainstream products, media services that are accessible to as many users as possible without the need of special adaptation or specialized design. It's always a good idea to put yourself in their shoes, some kind of empathize with the fact that not everyone uses websites the same way that you do. So, for example, there are people who can only use a website using a keyboard, or they can only use a mouse, or they can't see the website at all, so there's a screen reader. So those are things to consider when we're talking about inclusive design. And also the most important part about this is if you consider all of these things, inclusive design and accessibility, from the beginning of a website project, even before there's anything else on it, it helps a lot because there's not a whole lot of things that you have to like bandage and fix up later to make it accessible, right? So let's go over the acronym POUR. POUR helps you remember the 4 core principles and guidelines of WCAG. So P is for perceivable. All content should be distinguishable. Provide alternatives to non-text content. I'll be going over what alternative text is exactly. Provide alternatives to video and audio content like transcripts or basic text of what people are saying on the video. Create content that can be displayed in multiple formats. Create contrast between foreground and background. O, it should be operable. All content should be usable. Functionality needs to be keyboard accessible, as I've mentioned. So for people who can't use a mouse, Pe- provide users flexible time to read and use content. So something common, like say a rotating banner, you need to be able to give your users time to be able to read that headline, and be able to read it properly with enough contrast so they can see that if it's a white text in front of like a photo or something. And also you need to avoid animated flashes or blinking. So it's really trendy right now to have like a video background or something in the top of your website, and there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of stuff going on. But if say there's an important piece of text or headline that's in front of it that's white or something, it might be hard to read because there's a lot of things moving around in the background. Provide tools for wayfinding, so something as simple as a sitemap or a search bar. Understandable. All content should be comprehensible. Provide readable and understandable content. Design functions in predictable ways. So no really weird avant-garde kind of design where people can't find the navigation or it's tucked away somewhere. It has to be in a easy to read and easy to figure out what's going on. Provide tools to avoid and correct mistakes. So something as simple as having a contact form, you need to be able to tell your users that they've made a mistake or they didn't neglected to fill something in, then there should be some kind of indication that they need to fix something. And lastly, there's R for robust. All content can be interpreted by a variety of users. So it has to be compatible with all sorts of devices and such. So here at REM, we always make our websites fully responsive. That means it'll adapt to any screen size. So whether you're looking at it with a 4K monitor or something, or a smaller laptop, or a tablet or a smartphone, it has to be able to work on all of those.
That's right. Yeah. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about color contrast. So color contrast is very important. Christine and I use it every day when thinking about this with our designs. It's an essential design element. It helps us create areas of interest, supports visual hierarchy, and maintain the brand standards. So AODA, in partnership with the WCAG, does have some requirements regarding the use of the color in order to support people with color deficiencies and low vision. So right now, the requirements deal with contrast. However, this can affect your design in lots of different ways. So while we're working with color, we do want to maintain the color contrast minimum ratio of 4.5 to 1. So 4.5 being the foreground color and 1 being the background color. If you look at the example on the right-hand side here, you'll see what we're talking about here. And when it comes to text, 14-point bolded or 18-point and larger text needs only a ratio of 3 to 1. So a little bit more leeway there. When we're using texture, we can use this to complement color information. When we're working again with color, we want to make sure that text on images should always use as high contrast as possible. So again, Christine's example, the banners, banner image and text on top. We want to when we're dealing with decorative and incidental items, such as logos, these things are exempt from the rules. Color contrast checkers do exist online, and we do have some tools that are coming up in the end of the presentation. WebAIM and CCA are the great ones that we use every day. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the visual hierarchy and visual hierarchy regarding your headings on your website. So it's a method of organizing design elements in order of importance. The structure of the content must be in the correct sequence of readability. So really, the users must be able to navigate through the main menu of your website and all links on your website by tabbing on a keyboard. So these must be strategically placed in order to allow the reader to logically comprehend your content. So we also want to avoid areas or functionality where a user can become stuck or lost. So for example, here we have a pop-up window where they may not be able to use their mouse to exit out or to leave that pop-up. So again, on the right, we do have another example here of a proper sequence of headings and the hierarchy. And so they must properly nest within their rank or level. So starting with heading 1, we have this. This is only to be used once on a page. This is the main rule here. So every page of content, only one heading 1. From there, every heading that follows should be at least 1 point size or smaller. And you do need at least heading 2 to follow heading 1. So these headings can have different styles, so different colors and different fonts, etc. But the main rule is that they all have to nest under each other and have the 1 point size smaller.
All right, next we're going to be talking about images for the web. So you can't really go to a website nowadays without actually having to see any images. I guess the majority of websites do have a lot of images because it's a great way to convey something visually, right? And it makes it really stunning and beautiful, and it also makes it so that it's really attractive to users, and it'll draw them in and want to like look further into it. When it comes to images, though, there are important things to consider when it comes to AODA. The most important part being that you need alt text. So I did mention this earlier. It stands for alternative text. It's a tag embedded into an image using HTML code. So if you look at the bottom right here, you will see a little string of basic HTML. It tells you the source of the image, but it also says at the end, alt is side view of a red, black, and white van on a blue-gray background. So it's a vital component for AODA accessibility to have alt text. Unfortunately, when it comes to the World Wide Web, there's not a lot of images that actually have any alt text at all, or it's wrong, or it doesn't make any sense, or it's not descriptive enough. So this is an important factor for sure when it comes to AODA and WCAG 2.0. There's also other things that need alternative text as well. So when it comes to audio and video content, that means it's transcript or a caption at the bottom. And so that's an important part for sure. So the thing about alt text is the reason why it's important is, say, for example, it's someone who has a hard time perceiving your website because their vision is not as good. So they require the assistance of a screen reader, like for example, like JAWS or something. What'll happen is the screen reader will actually read that alt text and describe what that image is. So as somebody who can't see your website, that would help a lot, especially if it's important to the context of the site. So that is definitely something we consider as graphic designers, and definitely something really important. So W3C has some image classifications. So an image can be informative, so used to represent concepts or information, typically pictures, photos, and illustrations. So something as important as, say, your product photo, right? So say you sell a product, you want to be able to describe to a user what that product is, what size it is, the color, the material, all that kind of stuff, which is really important. And but an image can also be decorative. So a decorative image doesn't really need an alt text. It can be ignored because it's just there to make the website look pretty. So it doesn't really have any usable function. It's just there to jazz it up. So you can just, the screen reader can ignore that altogether. However, if you consider things that are functional, so say a pencil, I'm sure you've seen in Facebook or something like that, where like there's a little pencil where you'll be able to edit like a certain block of text. So there's usually a pencil icon, and that needs some kind of alt text that says edit text here or something. And then there's also complex images. So something like a chart or infographic, something that is not able to be described in a few words, that needs a long description. So just a few tips when it comes to making alt text for images. Use simple and plain language. Don't use more than 140 characters. Between 5 and 15 words is good enough. You don't really need a lot of text when it comes to adding alt text, because if you know that image, if you know that photo, you know that product, you can describe it in just a few words. Consider the context of the image. You can also describe the purpose of the image and what's in it. Avoid using words like picture and image, because that could be pretty redundant, because screen readers will actually say image and then describe it. So you want to avoid any audible clutter when it comes to that kind of stuff. So when it comes to images as well, if you're trying to evoke some kind of emotion with it, if you're trying to attract people with the actual image itself, it's a good idea to put an alt text that conveys that. On the other hand, if it's a decorative image and it doesn't really need an alt text because it's just there to make things look pretty, you can just ignore it altogether. And then that'll reduce, like I mentioned, that audible clutter. So we have another poll question here, a multiple choice kind of thing. So based on what we have learned so far, do you think your website would pass a compliance check? Please let us know. We're always interested to know the answer to this one, actually. Okay. Oh, look at that. That's interesting. Yeah.
So 0% with no.
Well, 0%,
Or sorry,
nobody
with
said
yes, yeah,
yes.
yes, with yes. 5% no.
But the majority,
6% maybe.
yeah, so the majority of people said maybe. And then the rest of them said no. So I would say that makes sense. So you're definitely in the right webinar if you're thinking no, definitely
Maybe,
not, or
maybe not, yeah.
yeah. So that's pretty cool,
Okay.
actually. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you
Yep.
for doing that.
And this may change your view of the next little couple slides that we do have. So next, we're going to be talking about creating accessible communications, and this is in regards to more so the content of your website. So it's more about how we communicate with our existing and potential clients. If you're committed to accessibility and inclusive design, it should be a part of all communications on your website. So with everything you put into your website, you should ultimately be asking yourself, is this accessible? So we have some items that are usually problems and with the accessibility and can always be improved most times. So accessible communications. First, we're going to start with documents. So documents being a Word program, a PDF, any type of download that you do have from your website. These documents, they must follow the same principles as your website does from our design factor section. So again, using the proper headings, color contrast, alt tags, all of these things are important for documents on your website as well. Next, we have maps. Maps are obviously very important on a website, especially if you have a storefront or an office that you're having customers and people trying to locate. So the good news is that third-party maps, such as Google, for example, are already default accessible. Next is videos. So videos communicate, complex and lengthy ideas. Sometimes can be done more efficiently with videos and multimedia such as podcasts. So adding a caption on your video or a backup script in a basic text form at least will help make these videos and audio accessible. And lastly, we do have infographics. So infographics you've seen many times on lots of different websites. They convey a lot of facts and statistics in a visually appealing way. So adding a long description is actually the best way to make these graphics accessible. So as promised, we do have some tools and links for everybody. This section, you may want to be taking some notes on these links because they're really handy. We use them every day at REM, and we've done our homework here, so we thought we'd give you some of our favorites. These tools not only help you check your website for compliance, but also aid you to determine what you need to fix the most. So first off, we have the main, as we've been mentioning through the presentation, the main one is the WCAG, so Web Content Accessibility Guideline. And the goal here is to provide a standard for accessibility. So w3.org is where you'll want to go for that one. Next up, we have WebAIM, webaim.org. It's a suite of tools for organizations to make your web content accessible. Next, we have the actual government of Ontario. So info from the provincial government about how to make your website accessible at ontario.ca. This website will give you the, everything you need to know for the laws and things like that. Next up, color contrast. So we've talked a little bit about color contrast. There are tools to determine the color contrast between your foreground and background color on your website or anything on the website. So this is, again, from webaim.org. Next is image contrast. Image contrast, this is a guide to help you determine the foreground text against a background image. So again, our example of a banner, if you put an image in the background, you're able to actually upload the image and put your text on top to check the contrast of that specific banner. This is from brandwood.com. And lastly, we do have AODA websites.ca. This is actually one we've created in-house ourselves. Christine and I have put a lot of work into this website. This will give you facts and the key dates, the next presentation we're planning on doing, all of the contact information that if you are looking to get some help with making your website compliant or even redesigning your website to make it compliant, this is the website to check out for sure. So that's it, everybody. Thanks for listening and signing up for today's webinar. Yeah, we'd like to kind of turn it over at this point for some questions or comments. And if you haven't yet, please drop a question in the Q&A, and we're going to get into it there. I see Rob come back. He's going to help us out with some of the questions too. So, and as a reminder, if you like the PDF copy of the presentation today, we just need your information and your email, and we can get that to you as quickly as possible. So.
Just to add a correction, and thank you, Michelle, for pointing it out. The reporting requirement actually has been extended. You are correct. That's been extended to June 2021 for companies 20 or more, just due to everything that's been going on. However, that does not change anything we've been talking about today regarding the website. At this point, that is still a requirement for the end of this year. So it's just the reporting requirement for your company that has been, they've pushed that to June.
Okay, that's good.
That was something a couple weeks ago that happened.
Oh.
We'll update the presentation for that then too.
That's my mistake. I have known about that for a couple weeks and I didn't let you guys know. So sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Keep you on your toes.
That's okay.
Time to do some improvising. Well, it's always getting updated, especially since it's closer to the date, right? Since it's getting to January, there's probably some updates and stuff now.
So if there are no other questions at this point, I would like to thank everybody very much for attending. Again, if we can help you in any way, if you want to have a consultation to find out if your site is indeed compliant, if you don't have somebody that's available to help you, certainly feel free to reach out to us. Again, up on the screen there is our contact info. So just give us a shout and we're happy to help you. Oh, looks like there's one other question here. Oh, just looking for the presentation.
Sorry, and we do have a question from Brian as well. He has his hand up, so I'll let him talk when you guys are ready.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Brian, if you want to unmute yourself, if you still have your question.
Oh, here. There's also another one too.
Looks like he's still muted there, Brian. I think.
The mute is in the bottom left corner.
Great.
If you guys want to move on to the other questions, I will see if I can
Yeah.
get that
Okay,
from Brian.
I can answer one here from Lucy. She said, "What are the major challenges you face while working with AODA compliant websites?"
Good
I
question.
think one of the major things, especially when it comes to starting a website project, is their branding color. I find that, like, remember when Sean was talking about color contrast and such, sometimes their branding colors are really light or pastel-y, or they don't have a lot of contrast, but that's the main color. The tricky part is trying to make it work. Sometimes it's something as simple as making it slightly darker or giving it a different shade or putting a different text color or some shadow or something. But that can be pretty tricky for sure. Um, what else would be it? That one is because, especially since it's branding, it's such an important aspect when it comes to their business. It's You want to make it as close as possible and still keeping with the overall look of what their business has. So that can be challenging sometimes.
Yeah, just creating a color palette that is accessible and within the same branding guidelines yeah, I understand that. I get that one.
Oh yeah, I know. Especially if they have like a yellow or something.
Mhm, mhm.
Can't put like white or something on it.
Yep. So every design that we do from the get-go is, compliance is important right off the get-go. So we think about color contrast, all of that stuff. Going forward, updating your website and keeping it compliant is also important as well, right?
Yeah. And then Lucy also has another question. What is going well when you approach new customers? I guess going well when it comes to AODA. I think so. We've definitely done it before. I think the nice thing that's going really well is that our customers are very accepting of the fact that their website needs to be compliant. We also look at it in a positive way. We don't go, website has to be AODA compliant. We look at it as like, oh, look, it's going to be compliant. It's going to be accessible to so many people and it's going to look great. And you know what? For some people, they think, oh, that's going to affect your design of your website. Oh, it's going to make it look ugly or something. But actually, it doesn't affect it that much, especially at the very base of it, right? Just the overall look. It doesn't change it that much. If anything, I think it gives it more contrast. It gives it more oomph, and you got the right, heading sequence and everything. So it makes it look nice. That's what I think.
Hmm.
There's a question from anonymous attendee. What
Oh,
does the June 2021 accessibility report entail? Is it related to the website? So the website should be part of that, but it has much more in it. So it covers the entire law, which will be things to do with your building, with your customer service standards, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to insert a link for you. Should share with everybody here. So this is the link to the page on the Ontario government's website that you'll need to go to download a template that they put together that you basically fill out.
yeah, it moves over to the answered tab.
Mhm.
And Lucy's asking how seriously businesses take it to meet the deadline. So I'm not exactly sure your wording there in the question. I'm going to take it as our business is taking it serious at this point. I would say for the most part, yes. Like most people, they are for the most part. I'm seeing a lot of people waiting to the last minute. I would say that if you're concerned about it, there's not a lot that's going to be able to be done between now and the end of the year, especially if the website is in real dire need. So my advice would be that if you're going to engage with a company such as us or someone else to help you, I think that if you were to get a knock on the door questioning the status of your compliance, or even if you're filing the report, as long as you make it clear that you're making best efforts and that you're in an active engagement with a professional company to get it to a certain point by a certain date, you're probably safe from any fines. I don't think that people are going to come, walking, or especially in the light of everything, coming door to door looking to fine you right, on January 1st. But I think, again, if you have evidence, you have a signed contract with a company that's working on it, I think that's probably enough to protect you. But again, back to what Sean said earlier in the presentation, remember that this is the Ontario government passing a law in 2005 that arbitrarily set up a number of, if you're 50 or more employees. That's the government deciding that. That doesn't change the fact that you, in theory, even if you're a smaller size company, are violating people's human rights by not having your website as something that everybody can access. And within the litigious environment that we live in these days, I would say it's a matter of time until the type of lawsuit that is happening in the US will make its way here, and people will catch wind that, oh, this is an easy way to sue somebody. The reality is the smaller companies aren't probably going to see it as much. They're going to go after the bigger ones for the bigger bucks. But you aren't necessarily protected just by following the Ontario law with this one. So it is a best practice to do, even if you are smaller than 50 employees, as much of a pain as it can be sometimes. But it really isn't a big deal, when you design it from the start that way. It's really just keeping certain things in mind when you're putting in pictures and so forth, and filling out those alt tags and so forth on an ongoing basis. So.
A great answer, Rob.
Well, thank you.
Good answer.
And just writing down people's email addresses before we close this out to make sure that I have everybody who wants a copy. Okay. So I think I have everybody's emails that want a copy. Again, if you change your mind after, just send an email to us. You can email it to sales@remwebsolutions.com. That comes to me. I promise to reply very quickly. I think we can call it a day. So thanks very much, everybody, for attending. And thanks so much for Sean and Christine for sharing your expertise and experiences so far. And I wish everybody a wonderful holiday season. It's coming soon, and I'm sure everybody needs a nice rest with their family. So I hope you get that.